Before we start this video, a large thank you to Lucas, Chris, Jin, and David for their support on Patreon. I hope you guys enjoy the video. Hello guys, and today we are going to add phases to our boss. Now this one is going to be a bit of a long one, sorry for the delay. Originally I was going to make it one part, but I just said, you know what, let's make it two parts in one video. So I have these attacks here, as you can see, attack 1 and attack 2. I'm going to duplicate these, and I'm going to call them second phase attack 1 and second phase attack 2. Now, this video is going to be a little bit long because this is two videos in one, basically, so bear with the process here. So let's start off by going to the combat stance state script and open that up. So as you can see, we have a get new attack functionality here, and we're going to actually edit that. And to do that, we're going to make another version of the script. I'm going to call boss combat stance state. I'm going to open up boss combat stance state and make it inherit from combat stance state. And then we're basically going to run the exact same logic except for one minor detail. So let's just put in my namespace here. Alright, so start and update functionality, and we're going to make this derived from combat stance state. Now, going back into here, as you can see here, we have our private variables. Let's change all of those to protected so we can actually use those on the inherited class. So anything that's private, make it protected. There we go. Looks good. Now, we're basically drawing attacks from a pool of possible attacks right now, and we're going to make this a virtual void now on the get new attack. And what we're going to do is we're going to make a check for what phase we're on in the boss fight. So if I go up here now and I make a public bool has phase shifted, as in like you've began the second phase of the fight, or third phase if you want to do multiple, whatever. I'm going to say override get new attack, and we're just going to make a simple if statement here. We're going to say if you have phase shifted, well, we're going to do some logic, and if we have not, we're just going to run the base variant of this function. And if we have phase shifted, what we're going to do is we're going to make a second array of attacks. So I'm just going to say public enemy. Actually, I'm just going to copy and paste it from over here. There we go, enemy attacks. And I'm going to change it to second phase enemy attacks. Actually, we're just going to say second phase attacks, so it's not so long. But basically, it's the exact same logic, but instead of drawing from the first pool of attacks, we'll now draw from the second pool of attacks. So you can actually copy all of this logic right now and paste it in here, and we're going to change one variable. We'll be changing enemy attacks to second phase attacks. So make sure I pasted all that. No, I'm missing a bracket. Let's go down and add a bracket right here. There we go. Okay, so now if we go back up here, you will see if I click here on enemy attacks, there's two enemy attacks. So let's just replace that with second phase attacks. And we'll do that through the whole logic. And then we have two pools of attacks to withdraw from. And that is so far so good. We're actually going to do a video next to on poise, and we're going to clean up the way the states handle their location variables, like the distance from enemies and stuff. But we're not changing anything, we're just making it look neater. We'll do that in the next video. So that looks good. All right, so now all we have is a simple fetch that will, instead of drawing from the regular pool of attacks, it will withdraw from the newer pool of attacks that we've made if the second phase bool is true. Let's make a header up here, and let's just call this second phase attacks. All right, but now we have no way of actually enabling this, so let's get to that part and, you know, the effects transition and all that good stuff. So if we go right here now on our boss scripts, let's go to the enemy boss manager. Let's minimize this here so I can see what I'm doing. Okay. We're going to start by saying public void. We're going to say shift to second phase. And what does this consist of? Well, usually we play an animation, but let's make another function because actually, let's green text this first. So we're going to want to actually play the animation where we you know, the boss will do a buff or a transition, so let's just say that. And that's going to have an animation event on it, which will then trigger the boss's effects. Let's say the sword catches on fire, which is what we're going to do, or like the eyes start glowing. It triggers a particle effect and an animation. And then after that's triggered, it switches the attack actions to the new phase attacks. And that's essentially what happens in most bosses. You know, every boss is a little different, but this is the gist of it. So you can tailor your own bosses a bit differently. I'm going to make the sword catch on fire for mine. So I'm going to say enemy animator manager here. We're going to call that here in the enemy boss manager. I'm just going to say enemy animator manager. I'm going to say get component enemy animator manager. Looks good. And then I'm going to come down here and we're going to say enemy animator manager dot play target animation. I'm just going to call this one phase shift. And true, we are interacting. Okay. And now for switching actions, we're actually just going to trigger a bool on the enemy boss manager. So let's just trigger, or the boss combat stand state rather. So let's just call that up here. We're going to say boss combat stand state. And we'll say get component in children for that because it resides in a game object that's under this in the hierarchy. This should be in children too, the enemy animator manager. That was my bad. So let's put that in children. Okay. There we go. All right, that looks nice. Now, right here, we're just going to simply say boss combat stand state dot, what do I call it? Is it has phase shifted or second phase? I think it's has phase shifted. Yes, it's has phase shifted. So boss combat stand state dot has phase shifted equals true. All right, great. So now we have to call this function somewhere else too. So we're going to say right here, we can say if, actually, wait a second, let me think about this real quick. No, yeah, we can do it somewhere else. I'm going to bring it here, but this is called over here. I'm getting my projects mixed up now, you see. So this is called right here. So what we can do is, I'll place it here first. We can simply say, if is not boss. Yeah, so we can simply say, if current health is less than or equal to max health divided by 2, so that's like half the HP. It's usually when you shift to the second phase. We'll say enemy boss manager dot, what did I call that functionality? Goodness. Shift to second phase. And that will be fine. But to keep it all on the same script, I'm actually just going to do this instead. I'll show you. So I'll say that you can't keep it there. That's perfectly fine. Nothing wrong with that at all. But we can actually just add a necessity for a max health variable here when we call this. And then right here, as you see, you'll get an error. And we pass our max health here. And then we just literally grab this and copy it and delete it from here and bring it back here. I'm just keeping it in this function because I want it all on the same script. It just, to me, it makes sense for it to be here. And then that's it. So I'm just going to delete this here and keep that right there like that. And that looks nicer to me. Okay, that's saved. Now that's good so far. So we're calling the update if we reach half health. So let's make a header up here, and we're going to call this second phase effects. Now this is where we actually handle the particle effects. So I'm just going to make it a game object because maybe you're going to spawn something else in, but I'm just going to use mine. I'm going to call it particle effects. And now I'm going to get a bit creative. So on my weapon here, I made a new weapon, by the way. I've made this transform called boss effects transform. I placed a script on it. The script is empty. It's just going to be used to reference where this is going to instantiate. So make an empty script. I'll show you it. And basically position that transform where you want to instantiate your particle effects. So mine's completely blank. And I've placed some particle effects on it here just to show where it will appear. And now I'm going to take them off. So then go to your animator manager. I'm going to the enemy animator manager for this one. And just anywhere down here, I'm going to make a public void instantiate boss particle effects. And the reason why we're doing it on this is because this sits on the same game object as the animator, so we can call this on an animation event. That's why we're putting this function on the enemy animator manager. Probably going to change the position of this function in the future to an effects manager, but for now it's going to sit right here. But we're going to get into weapon upgrades later and buffs and stuff, so we're going to move some of this stuff around, but the functionality will still stay the same, don't worry. So we're going to say boss effects transform equals get component in children boss effects transform, and this will be on the weapon that the boss has in its hand that I just showed you. It's just an empty script. It's just basically to reference the position that you want to spawn your particle effects on. So then I'm going to say game object phase effects is equal to instantiate effects at the location of boss effects transform dot transform. And that's it. Oh, actually, I just realized we're calling this on an animation event, so I can't pass a game object through this. So we're going to have to actually reference the boss manager on the script, which is fine. So let's just erase this real quick. And then up here, yeah, that would be the best way to do it. Up here, we'll reference our enemy boss manager, and we'll say enemy boss manager. And if you don't have one on your regular enemies, it won't give you an error, don't worry. So we can just say enemy boss manager equals get component in parent enemy boss manager, because you're only going to be calling this functionality on a phase shift animation that will hopefully only be on your boss or bosses. So we'll say enemy boss manager dot, what did I call it again? There we go. Let's go back. That's particle effects. Okay. So in theory, now that should work. Let's put that in there. And let's go. Let's check a couple things here real quick. One moment. All right, so I made this butcher sword. I'm going to make this new butcher sword for the boss butcher sword. And the reason why I'm doing this is because on this new game model, I have that that boss effects script where it's going to spawn the second phase effects on the blade. So I'm just going to give the boss his own weapon, basically. It'll just be a copy, exact replica of the butcher sword, minus the fact that the game model has that script to spawn the new particle effects on it. And in the future, when I add weapon buffs, I'm going to refactor that and just integrate it into the weapon buff system. But for now, this is going to do perfectly. All right, so I'm going to drag in the phase shift animation that I have and put that to the empty state. I'm also going to check foot IK, just so the feet touch the ground. And we're going to do a couple things with the animator in this video too. So first, let's go to the animation here. Let's go and click on our boss and go to phase shift. And as you can see, mine is he just kind of pumps the sword into the air like this. So right at the peak of that, I'm going to add an animation event, and then I'm going to look for the event that I created that spawns the particle effects here. So instantiate boss particle effects. And then if you want to add an explosion to that too, or like a little like boom, like a ring of fire, you can do that too. Get really creative with it. Don't just limit yourself to what I'm doing in this video. I'm going to crank my health up in the game here just to do some testing to make sure that I can actually hit the boss without dying. Okay, there you go. And he does that, so that's cool. And he's actually shifted to the new attack pattern as well. And his sword is on fire. So that works great, but we have an error. Oh, he didn't shift the new attack pattern, right? What does this say? Boss. Okay, what do I have an error? Let me see. Let's track this back. Okay, so boss combat stance state has not been found, but I'm calling it here on awake. That's weird. Let me check the game model. Yeah, it's definitely a child of the game object too, because it's under here. Let's go down to states, combat stance. Oh, it's still the regular combat stance state. Oh, that's my bad. Okay, so remove the regular combat stance state and add the boss combat stance state. And then you're going to want to, again, fill out your regular attacks, and then fill out your second phase attacks. So a lot of the bosses in Dark Souls just have the same attacks in phase 2 with a couple other extra attacks. So if you want to do that, go for it. But just for testing purposes, I'm actually going to make mine different attacks so I know for sure that it has switched. So I'm just going to double click these here. I got second phase attacks 1 and 2. Okay, cool. That looks good. All right, so let's drag back in all the states. Make sure you're doing that. Like we just replaced the combat stance state, so make sure you're going and checking all your states and dragging back in the combat stance state in the inspector to the other states that require a combat stance state. Otherwise, you'll get some weird behaviors. And back here in the enemy boss manager, you're going to want to say if current health is less than or equal to max health divided by 2, and you want to also make sure the boss combat stance state has not phase shifted. Otherwise, we'll keep calling that. And then we're going to say boss combat stance state dot has phase shifted is equal to true. Sorry about that brightness. My HDR just kind of flickered and it's messing with the recording. All right, so now on the animator for the enemy AI, we're going to add a bool here. We're going to say is phase shifting, because we don't want to be able to interrupt that at all. Like we want that to be uninterruptible. So let's just basically make a bool here like we do for everything on our animator. And we're going to go to the enemy manager, and we're also going to make a bool called is phase shifting. I think we already have is invulnerable. We might play with that too. You don't have to make them invincible. Sometimes Dark Souls just buffs their defense while they're shifting to the second phase, but you can also optionally make them invincible. But for now, I'm just going to add a bool here on their AI combat settings is phase shifting. And on the update method, we're just going to simply say, right under is interacting, we're going to say is phase shifting is equal to enemy animator manager dot anim as an animator dot get bool is phase shifting, and that's it. So we're going to want to toggle that and change it when we start phase shifting. So we'll do that with a function. And now under the reset animator bool, let's actually remove that, and let's add reset animator bool AI. Oh, I forgot. We're actually still using the same animator controller on our AI as we are on our humanoid. I'll get my projects mixed up, you see. So we're actually going to also make another animator controller for just the AI because we're going to do a couple things differently. But for now, we'll get to that. So let's make this drive from reset animator bool because it's going to use everything that's on reset animator bool. You still have to reset your is interacting, your is invulnerable, all that good stuff that we do with our player. But we also want to be able to reset AI only things. So in the future, if we add AI parameters on our animator, we can just reset them here without affecting our player. So I'm just going to paste in here a string and a bool, and I'm just going to basically call the base reset animator properties. So base on state enter, we're calling everything that's on the base class, and then we're going to say is phase shifting and is phase shifting status equal to false. And we're just going to put that in there like we did many times in the past. Now, I just made a mistake because, again, I thought this was its own animator controller, but as you can see, it's actually just a humanoid controller. So let's actually duplicate this controller right now, and let's call the duplicated version the AI humanoid. And then we're going to go back to the humanoid controller, and we're just going to simply remove the AI reset animator bool thing. Make sure you drag the AI humanoid into your boss. Let's remove this reset animator AI and just add reset animator bool because this is one for our player. So make sure you have the AI humanoid controller on your boss and your AI in the future because we're going to be using that moving forward. They won't differ too much except for a few things that AI will only have. I mean, you could use the same controller if you wanted to, but you would just be filling in empty bools that would never affect a player. So let's separate it. Now on shift to second phase, let's say enemy animator manager.anim.setBool is phase shifting is equal to true. So we'll change the bool over. And we should be good. And then we're going to say here on take damage, this is under enemy states. Actually, you know what? No, we're not going to do it that way. Let's just go up here and we're going to say enemy manager. We're going to call our enemy manager. This is on enemy stats, by the way. We'll say enemy manager equals get component enemy manager. Okay, it looks good. Now, bosses in Dark Souls don't usually get stunned when you hit them. They can, but there's like a poise effect, and we're going to get to that in the next video. We're going to make poise for our enemies and our bosses. But for now, we're going to say on take damage. We're going to say if you're phase shifting, we're going to take damage, no animation. Otherwise, we're going to take damage regularly. Because we don't want to knock the enemy out of the phase shift animation, because then we won't get the effects that go off. So over here in the reset animator bool, let's actually add is invulnerable as well. Because if you want to trigger invulnerability on that animation, we want to make sure it disables when you've done the animation. So let's just say is invulnerable is equal to is invulnerable, and is invulnerable status is equal to false. So every time you leave the animation, you are no longer invulnerable. This is also a safeguard for if you're rolling and you somehow get locked into the animation event of being invulnerable, it will reset when you come back to the empty state. So it's always good to have this here regardless. All right, so let's put there is invulnerable is equal to is invulnerable status. This is on the base class because the AI will still derive from that and have it as well. Let's go to, yeah, that looks good. Okay, excellent. And I think, yeah, back to shift to second phase here. On the enemy manager, rather, sorry. Let's call is invulnerable. And for some reason, I don't have that on the enemy manager. Am I only calling that on the player manager right now? So let's go to the character manager and see if we can find it. All right, so yeah, I don't see it. So let's make a public bool. Is invulnerable. It should turn green. No, it doesn't. Oh, it's on the player manager, but I spelled it wrong. Okay. All right, well, let's paste that here on the character manager, and let's rename it. If you spelled it wrong like me, I'm going to rename it the right way so it's not spelled wrong. But just basically change it from the player manager to the character manager so the enemy manager can also have it. And then on the enemy manager, we are going to simply say is invulnerable is equal to enemy animator manager .anim.getBool is invulnerable. So now your enemy has the ability to use that functionality, and if he is invulnerable when the take damage function is called, they will take no damage, which is good. All right, excellent. Now, just a couple more things to do. On the shift to second phase, say enemy animator manager.anim.setBool is invulnerable. I'm going to change mine to true during this animation. I don't want them to be able to take damage, just briefly. Also, for now, since we have, let's just Yeah, we're actually going to get rid of this on the take damage. We're just going to say base take damage, and then let's go to the damage collider itself, because we're going to have poise next video. But for now, we're going to say if enemy stats does not equal null. We're going to say if enemy stats is boss. Instead of taking damage regularly, we're just going to take damage with no animation. And I'm doing this because in the next video, we're going to do a poise system. So for now, let's just make it so our enemy cannot have a damage animation. We'll set up a way to actually deal with that in the next video. So we're just going to say enemy stats that take damage, weapon damage. So back here in the take damage, no animation, we're going to say if is boss, because, you know, we have this health bar situation. And enemy boss manager does not equal null. You can actually even just copy and paste this down here. It's the exact same logic. Just like that. There we go. All right, cool. Now this should work. All right, so he's at half health. If I dodge this here and hit him again, there you go. He buffs, his sword catches on fire. He should lunge at me now. Yes, he does. And we changed the weapon attack patterns. All right, guys. If you like this video, be sure to drop a like, leave a comment. It does help appease the YouTube algorithm gods. And if you're feeling super generous, check out my Patreon below. In the next video, we're going to tackle some enemy and NPC poise, and the system will be very integratable for player poise. But the boss poise is a little different, because if you break the boss's guard, we'll say, or poise, you're going to have the ability to critically attack them. We'll get to that as well. But player poise just kind of dictates if you can be knocked out of your attack animation, etc., etc. All right, guys, well, I will see you in the next video.